Hello, it's Dawn Michelle and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing another mini deck collection video and we're going to be looking at all the decks in my summer basket, and this thing is huge. I'm going to grab them pretty much as they are sitting in my basket. I will go ahead and show you all the bags that I've made because most of what is in my summer basket is decks that I use regularly throughout the summer season. There are also a lot of them are favorites in my collection, and most of them I have made bags for. So this is my Tarot de St. Croix. This is the second edition, the borderless edition of this deck. So here's the beautiful backs. I have edged mine in black and I absolutely love this deck. I've talked about it many times on my channel. It's one that I use a lot for spiritual work, particularly spiritual growth work. I use it in working with several of my deities, and it's just a really wonderful all-around reader for me. It is a Rider-Waite-Smith sort of base deck, so it's a really easy read, but I love the sort of world that this deck inhabits. This Wheel of Fortune is one of my favorites. There's so many things about this deck that kind of resonate with me on a personal level that it makes it one of those decks that I can use for that very deep inner growth work. I've done a whole video on this deck. I know I mentioned this card in particular because I pulled this card out of the deck a lot of times and use it for work that I'm doing in my spiritual growth work. So I've used that one quite a bit. But overall, like, this deck just really resonates with that summer energy for me. While I do use it year round because I work with it, like I said, in my growth practice, it's also a deck that I use a lot in the summertime because it has a lot of that rich kind of energy to it, the sort of creative, fiery energy that I feel like comes through in summer. So my favorite Knight of Wands probably ever. A lot of my favorite cards exist in this deck, and it's just a really fantastic reader. But again, I feel like it really resonates with summer energy. I think it's a lot of the like oranges and stuff. Also, the first edition of this deck had orange borders. I do still have mine because I do actually kind of love the orange borders. It's like one of those decks that you don't like the borders at first and you're like, ooh, that's gross, you know, I don't like it, it's whatever. And then like after a while, it kind of becomes a part of the deck, and then it kind of takes on the energy of the deck. And so I think part of it is the orange border from the first edition, although what I have in my basket currently is the borderless edition because that's the one I've been working with for the last year or so. So the next deck that I have in my summer basket is my trimmed version, my second trimmed version of the Tarot of the Sidhe. I have another version of this deck that is completely trimmed down borderless, and you'll see I've done something different with this one. Here's the beautiful backs. I have trimmed it though. I have edged it in black. But in this one, basically what I did was just, I made it smaller. So this deck comes on really large glossy cardstock, and it can be quite a challenge to work with. And I do have a copy of this deck that I've taken down completely borderless, which I absolutely love, and I use with my trimmed copy of the Star Tarot and my trimmed copy of the Llewellyn, and I do, like, there's a very certain reading that I do with that. But I really love the write-ups in the guidebook as well, and so I wanted to have a version that had the titles and the keywords on it because I do think they're quite wonderful in this deck, and I do really like working with them when I'm not working in that one particular reading where I'm working with the artwork very intuitively. When I want to just work with this deck and use it in readings in a general sense, I like having the titles and the keywords on there because that's definitely something I tap into. I like getting into the guidebook for this one. It's definitely one that feels like it's a she deck, it's a fae deck. But to me, the way that this deck reads is very alien. I feel like this deck is very cosmic. I feel like these fae creatures are otherworldly, as in from like another planet type of a thing. Not just another sort of realm, but maybe a whole nother planet. That's just the energy that I get from it. And it is very much in alignment with the way that I work with it. I have other decks that I work with in terms of Fae or Fairy energy. This deck I actually work with more in alignment with that sort of alien, otherworldly type of energy. It's also, for me, you'll notice a lot of the coloration tends to dictate what decks end up in what seasonal baskets. This one has a lot of purples in it. Purple for me is like purples and blues are colors along with reds and like yellows and oranges, which is so funny as I'm looking at my basket. There is a very distinct color pattern between I have like oranges and reds on one side and blue and purples on the other. That's just, I guess, apparently how my brain works. But you'll notice I have a lot of like cosmic blue purpley kind of decks, and I also have a lot of that sort of red orangey fiery kind of decks, and those are both energies that I associate with summer. So this deck feels more like that in that cosmic otherworldly, but color wise it's like summer nighttime energy, where like it's still warm. It's night, it's purpley and blue, but it's still warm. There's still a lot of heat. There's still a lot of energy in the air during summertime. And so I feel like this deck really resonates really well with that summer energy, that summer kind of summer nighttime energy. Again, as I'm looking at my basket and with those colorways, I completely have my basket divided up in that energy too, which is just kind of funny because that's just how I put them in there. But I absolutely adore working with this deck. All of these decks I really like using year round, but they kind of sit in that energetic space for me of a certain season. And so the way I categorize my tarot decks, and you'll notice that it's all tarot in this collection, because how I organize my oracles is completely different. Well, not completely different, slightly different. But how I organize my tarots is definitely by seasonal energy. And so I have my 4 main seasonal baskets, which contain my 4 main or the decks that I use consistently throughout those 4 main seasons. We've already done the spring one. I'll leave a link for that in the description box below in case you missed it. And now we are in summertime. So another deck that I like to use in the summertime is my Goddess Tarot. This is another modified deck. Here's the beautiful backs. It did have white borders around. I took those off and I edged it in this sort of bronzy gold color to match the titles that I did actually leave on this deck. So I just took the white border off because it was a border within a border situation, and I think it looks so much better without it. I really love this deck. This is like my summer goddess tarot. When I want to work with divine feminine energy in the summer, this is usually the deck that I go to for that. I do love the way that this deck reads. I like the energies associated in it. The little guidebook is fantastic. I do work with it sometimes when I work with this deck, but I really don't need to, mostly because they've put the name of the goddess. So all of the major arcana has goddess. All of the minor arcana associates with one particular sort of pantheon, and it's all, I mean, I guess in the minors it's not written which one it is, but it's pretty visible which pantheon it is. And in the majors, the name of the goddess is actually on the card, which I really do appreciate. So we have the star with Inanna. We have the magician or magic with Isis. And you can look in the guidebook to see who else is in some of the cards, which is fantastic. I do believe there might be a bigger guidebook for this. I can't remember now, but like all the cups kind of exist in the Arthurian kind of a realm. And again, it's the colors, it's the orangey, like summery, reddish, orangey kind of color. The colors throughout the deck also kind of remind me of that summer energy. It's got a lot of energy within the cards and the way that it reads, and I really enjoy working with it. But it just feels like when I hold it, it feels like summer in a deck, because I feel like I have summer days, summers at the beach, summer like sunset summers. And I feel like this is just the whole realm of summer, like, and it's probably maybe through the borders, these detailed borders that it has on it. Maybe that's kind of what gives me the vibes, but this feels like summer in my hand. So another deck in my summer basket is my Cirque du Tarot. And this one, again, is another deck that I have edged. So I edged it in this a peachy orange color to match the backs. I really love this deck. I know this is one of those decks that people like kind of love or hate because the quartz are different in this deck in terms of how they're depicted, but I love the story progression of the quartz and how it does really sit in alignment with how I read quartz energy, even though the artwork is pretty much the same. It's just, it's changed throughout the suit. The color changes, the artwork doesn't. That's what I'm trying to get at. This deck though feels like a circus, like it's, well, obviously it's the Cirque du Tarot, but it feels like going to a circus in the summertime. It feels very, it's whimsical, it's fun. It could probably be in like a good moods deck for me too. Funny thing is I really like to pair this with my Margaret Peterson, which doesn't really feel like a summer deck, but there's just something about the way that those two decks work together I really, really enjoy. But in terms of like being a summer deck, this just feels like, yeah, Nights Beneath the Big Top in summertime. Because there's like a lot of fire too in this deck. Like the whole wand suit is very fiery. I love that the pentacle suit is like this almost steampunky industrial thing going on. There's so much about this deck that I actually really like. Okay, so here's a good example. So you can see here in the pages that it's the same, it's not quite the same. It's very similar imagery. And basically what happens is we see this one character getting ready throughout the quartz. So you'll see their costuming changes, and like in each of the quartz, like there's the getting ready, there's the putting on the costume, there's the going out, and I wish I could find more of them. And then like stepping onto stage, right? And those are the progression of the quartz in this deck. But the artwork is very, very similar. And the people look very, very similar. So I think they could have maybe incorporated a little bit of maybe different looking people would have been helpful. I don't have a problem with it at all. Yeah, see, like here's the Knight of Wands. She's putting on her gloves. But she looks very similar, or they, I should say, to any other knight in this deck. I think I've done a full review of this deck. So I probably shouldn't go too deep into this in this video since we're supposed to be just looking at my summer decks. But I really appreciate it because it's about a progression, and that is the way that I read the quartz. So I'm cool with it being the same character, and I'm cool with them progressing through their story of getting ready and then to taking the stage. So, but as like the fiery energy that comes through the aces is amazing in this deck. It's like there's the knight and queen. So like she's putting on her gloves, she's got her costume on, she's getting ready, and now she's like prepping her getting ready to like step on the stage. She's getting her tools together and like cultivating what she needs to put on her little show. And I think it's cool. It works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but it works for me. But see, there's the Queen of Cups, and she looks exactly the same, other than like her skin tone's a little bit different, and her costume is clearly different. She's got, you know, a cup instead of a wand, but it's the same perspective. And I think that's what throws a lot of people off. But it totally works for me. So I'm good with it. Anyway, I love this deck. Actually, it's one of my favorite ones to use in the summertime. So another deck that I quite enjoy using in the summertime is the Cosmic Slumber Tarot. I can never remember the name of this deck. Here's the backs, which are fantastic. This deck is not only like a great summer deck for me because I really like the colors. Anything with a lot of bright, vivid color like this, if it's pastel colors, it ends up in my spring basket. If it's bright colors like this, it ends up in my summer basket. This one has brighter, like for me, this is bright. I know that for other people, this wouldn't be considered a bright deck. It does have extra cards, and I have left them in here. But for me, this is a bright deck. And the colors resonate with the energy of summer for me, because summer is a lot. It's a lot of energy. There's a lot going on. It tends to be a bit for me, it tends to be a bit overwhelming. Summer's an overwhelming season for me. It's not my favorite. So I like having decks in my summer basket that like kind of make me happy too. Kind of like tying back into that good moods deck things, because it is a challenging season for me. But this deck, not only does it resonate with summer energy, but it also has kind of a distinct purpose in my collection where I use it a lot for dream work. It works, like that's kind of its thing, I think. I don't know that I've ever actually fully read the guidebook, but these decks kind of exist in a dreamscape, and I really enjoy working with them in my dream work. The coloration doesn't always fit with the energy of the dream, but if I'm just doing kind of like work in general, where I'm just kind of trying to dig beneath the surface of some dream that I had, this is the deck that I tend to go to, unless there's something very specific about the dream, right? But it also feels like it really resonates with summer energy. And I'm not real big into color, right? We've established this. I live in a black and white world. But I do really appreciate color, and I love to work with color. I just need to work with color very mindfully and very carefully, and not all the time, because I do find color to be a bit overwhelming at times. And an entire deck of color like this at times can be overwhelming for me. But I also love that this particular deck, like just the illustrations make me really happy. And so if I'm gonna have to kind of deal with some high energy stuff, I like to work with decks like this during the summertime, because it works really well in terms of like kind of bringing a little bit of joy and play into that work that sometimes is a bit challenging for me. So the next deck is one of my like ultimate kind of good mood favorites decks, and this is the Desert Illuminations Tarot. Again, you'll see I have a very consistent theme in my summer decks. Look at the trippy backs, I love it. This deck is one of my favorites. I know I've shown it quite a bit in the last couple months, but it is like fairly new to me. This is the indie edition, and I do believe it's coming out mass market. I do not know when. I think it might be from US Games, but do not quote me on that. I really love this cardstock. It shuffles like a dream. It does tend to run away from me, and I'm really glad I got the indie version, because I don't always like the US Games cardstock. Sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's way too thick and big and glossy and oversized, and I can't work with it. Anyway, I freaking love this deck. This deck to me is everything that is fun about summer. It has aliens, like there's a huge alien theme throughout here. Again, we're looking at stuff that's very colorful. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like my childhood, growing up down in Southern California. And then I had a grandfather that lived like out in the middle of the desert, like way away from the city. And like a lot of the landscapes kind of just remind me of like childhoods like spent running around in the middle of the desert. And it's just, I don't know, it's fun. Also, like the aliens, they just make me happy. It's just such a good mood deck. But I feel like this deck in terms of a summer energy represents like all the fun things about summer. Particularly like all the fun things about summer, like when you're a kid, like the kid energy of summer, where it's, you know, not the grown up, oh my goodness, the kids are out of school, we need to find something to do with them all summer long. It is the kid version of summer energy where, yes, it's like this release, this freedom. You are out of school. You've got the whole summer ahead of you to just play and hang out with your friends and do all the fun things. That is what this deck is. It is like childhood summer. And it's so fun, and it's so colorful. And like, I love everything about it. I just do. It's such a good mood deck for me too. It's like my ultimate good mood deck, really, is what it comes down to. So a new addition to my summer basket, and let me tell you, like, okay, so I upped the size of my baskets recently because I had to, and they are as big as they can get and still fit on the shelves. But it's rare that I actually add a deck into my seasonal basket. So it kind of has to like earn its place there. And this is the Pasta Tarot, which I spoke about in the Good Moods pairing video. That like there's a whole thing with this. I'm not going to go into that again because I went too far into that in that video, but this deck is so much fun, and it does feel like a summer picnic, and I think that's why it's in the summer basket. Also like super colorful. just a lot of fun. This deck kind of feels like summer vacation. So, you know, like when you get to like leave all of the stress of regular life and the mundane and all of that, and you get to just like go away somewhere fun and hang out and like eat food and, you know, experience all the wonderful things in an area and just like enjoy. That is what this deck is. It's like enjoyment in a deck. Even though it's like pasta based, it feels like a summer vacation, a summer picnic. Like even if you can't get away on vacation, like you can still like go have a picnic at the park or something or at the beach. And I just absolutely love this deck. I think it's so fun. It kind of caught me by surprise because I wasn't expecting it to be like as good of a reader as it actually is. This card makes me laugh every time. It's such a good mood vibe too that I really enjoy it. But it's also a really solid reader, and I think that's great. It's like you can be on vacation but still like do the things that you need to do like in order to like be a functioning human being too, right? That's like what this deck is. Did that make sense? That's probably silly. So another deck that is in my summer basket is my Faerie Tarot. I think that's the name of this deck. I have edged mine in yellow to match the backs. Did I show you the backs? Probably not. Here you go. There's the backs. Sometimes I get discombobulated in these big collection videos because there's so many decks. This deck is fairly new, as y'all will probably know if you've watched some of my recent monthly videos or my monthly wrap-ups. It's a fairly new deck in my collection, but it just feels like summertime fairy energy, and I just absolutely love it. Some of them feel like nighttime fairy, some of them feel like daytime fairy. This is such a fun deck. It's definitely in that good moods for me. It also has my favorite knights, although this Queen of Wands is pretty amazing, which I think I mentioned like every time. Also, this Empress is super fierce and I love it. You very rarely get to see a fierce Empress, and I think that that's amazing. There's so much about this deck that I really love. It's very elemental, it's very numerological, and I really appreciate that because it kind of, you can read it Rider-Waite-Smith, but it doesn't necessarily stick 100% to that, and I really appreciate that. Look at this Three of Wands. It's amazing. I was hoping to come across a knight here because I know I've mentioned it many times before with this deck. There's a knight. There's just something about the knights in this deck that I just absolutely love. I think they're amazing. I love the way that they're depicted. Just energetically, they feel like the best depiction of knights that I've seen in a really, really long time. And yeah, this is just like summer fairy fun. I love it. I love the colors. I love the crazy borders. Again, you can see color and craziness and a lot of energy tends to be things that end up in my summer basket. And this one is definitely no exception. Another deck that lives in my summer basket is my Tarot of the Divine. This deck to me has a weird name. It's a storybook deck. It's a fairy tale deck. Here's the beautiful backs. I do want to edge it at some point, but I haven't decided on a color because it has white borders on the front. This deck is fantastic. I do really love working with this deck. I do tend to use it more with readings like around my kids or having to do with my kids. More so than myself, although like to be perfectly honest, I don't work with it a ton. It's a very specific energy. And I haven't really, I think because the first few readings I did with it, because this reminds me of storybooks that I used to read my kids, cartoons that we used to watch together when they were little, that I feel like I kind of have that association with this deck. And I haven't had a ton of luck working with it for myself. So I need to do some work with it in that way because like I think it's gorgeous. I really love the depictions in the deck. I do have the larger book. So there is a separate book that you can buy. It might be a part of a set now. I don't know because I've had it for quite some time. But I do need to do more work with this just with for myself, like in working with it in my own growth. Like look at this Two of Cups. That's amazing. I don't know. It's so good. It's so good. I really love the depictions. And I think that this is a deck that sometimes people see and they're like, well, I don't know these fairy tales and I can't work with the deck if I don't. I think that working with the fairy tale with the deck adds another layer to it, but I've rarely worked with the fairy tales. Like if I don't know the fairy tale, I don't really go on the hunt for it. I just read it the way I would any other tarot deck. and like it works beautifully for that. But there's just something about it that just, it makes me think of my kids. And so I don't know if I'll ever really be able to distinguish or separate between, you know, that from this deck. But if I can't and I don't end up ever really using it for me and just use it for them, like that's totally cool too. I think that there's a place for this in my collection and in my practice, and I'm very grateful to have it. But in terms of like energy, right, it sits in the summer basket because it's like, it's colorful, right? It's like summer stories. And part of that is too, because like during the summertime when my kids were little, we could read more stories in the summer and things like that. So I feel like I have that association with it as well. So another deck, I only have two decks in boxes in my summer basket. I'm not 100% sure if I'm gonna make a bag for this one or not, because like I really don't mind the box that it comes in. This is obviously the Pacific Northwest Tarot. Here's the backs, and you will notice that this deck is still in order because I have yet to work with it, but the colors make me feel like it's a summer deck. You know, it's the purples and the blues and the oranges that just really make this deck feel like, it feels like camping. That I think that's probably what it is. It feels like camping in the summertime here because it's the Pacific Northwest Tarot and that's where I live. So it like we're most out and about in the nature scape of our area in the summertime, because like really the rest of the time it's raining. But I haven't worked with this one yet, so I definitely need to. It's on my list. I bought it because like it's the Pacific Northwest Tarot and I live in the Pacific Northwest, and it does have an orca, so like it's totally got that going for it. Absolutely love that. It's super cute. I am really excited to work with it. I just haven't gotten around to it. And that's probably because I don't work with a ton of animal decks. And right now the animal decks that I am working with are actually not in the summer seasonal energy, which is really interesting because I should probably pull this one out and use it, being as it's summertime or really close to it. So anyway, it's a beautiful deck. I just haven't gotten around to working with it yet, but it is in my summer basket because it definitely feels like summertime in the Pacific Northwest. Okay, speaking of decks that kind of feel like camping, this is the Spacious Tarot. This is also another deck that in general lives in my summer basket. It is currently one that I was working with for some energetic readings, so I did have it out, but like look at those backs. I haven't edged this one yet either. But again, very similar to the Pacific Northwest Tarot. I feel like those two they kind of occupy the same space, except for this is like, it's a little bit more pippish maybe. I don't know. I shouldn't make comparisons because I haven't worked with the Pacific Northwest Tarot. However, I've done a ton of work with this deck, and it is a deck that again feels like summertime. It feels like camping, you know, summertime camping. It does have a Pacific Northwest feel to me, so it feels very much like home. I recognize like a lot of these landscapes as places that could exist in and around where I live, so it's fantastic. I use this one a lot for energetic readings, when I'm checking in with my energy, like where my energy is, how it's moving, things like that. This deck works really well for that. I also I have a particular oracle deck that I pair it with and everything, but like generally it lives in my summer basket because it does feel like a summer deck to me. It has that energy. Like again, it feels like being outdoors camping in the summertime, and particularly because it kind of, you know, looks like where I live. It's really easy for me to connect with this one. It's also, again, it's a pip deck primarily, so it's very numerological and elemental, which I really appreciate because that is more in alignment with how I read. So apparently we're going to start transitioning into those summer cosmic energies with the Superlunaris Tarot. This is the Spark edition. This is the only other deck in my basket that does not have a bag, and it will get one as soon as I get a chance to make it one. This is beautiful backs. Again, purple, blue. See a theme here. This deck is really new to my collection, so I've shown it a few times in various videos, but I really haven't had a chance to really deep dive work with it yet. I am working with it this month, so maybe I'll have more to share with you at the end of the month, but it does feel like summertime in a deck. It's, again, it's those colors. the energy of it. It feels like there's a lot going on in these cards. These cards feel very energetically potent. And so I do find that it's a deck, in the little bit of work that I have done with it, I feel like it's a deck that I need to kind of take a few cards at a time. Like I can't do large readings with this deck. It's too much energy for me, which is really interesting because it is essentially a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Like it follows the RWS really, really closely. We have some beautiful, beautiful reimaginings of the cards though. And I really appreciate the world, the landscape that this deck inhabits, and the people, the community that it represents. But I do find it to be a lot. So it fits really well in the summer category for me, because a lot of those decks, like, I do find to be like a lot, energetically a lot. This deck is energetically a lot. It's also very like chatty. It has like a lot to say, and so I think that's why I do kind of only use a few cards at a time with it. I pair other decks with it, but it's super chatty. It has a lot to say, and so it can be a little bit overwhelming at times for me. But I really have been enjoying getting to know it this month. So another deck that lives in this basket is, oh my goodness, what is this deck called? I think it is called the Hidden Light Tarot or something like this, something like that. I have what I think might be the first edition, or it's definitely, the box looked different than what is available currently. And I don't know if there were any card changes because I picked this up at the potlatch table at the Northwest Tarot Symposium. It is a collage deck, and it is definitely a mixed media collage deck. Again, same kind of thing with, there's a lot of energy in this deck. There's a lot of color in this deck. I feel like it has a lot going on, so it definitely resonates with that. At times can be super overwhelming energy. This deck is kind of on the cusp of almost being too chaotic for me. I think I've talked about it before, and I probably need to do like a proper collage decks video. But sometimes, like, I absolutely love collage, but I tend to lean more into minimalistic collage, if that's a thing. Like, less is more in my collage work on the whole. There are a few decks that are very maximalist in their collage style that I really enjoy, and I work with quite intensively, but I don't use a lot of cards. This deck is right on the cusp of that, where I can work with quite a few cards in it, but it does have a lot to say, and there's a lot going on in all of the cards. So again, in that sense, it kind of resonates with that sort of summer energy, because like it can be a lot. And again, this is just how I interpret the seasonal energies. Somebody else will have a completely different framework for how they work with summer energy, or how they interpret it, if they interpret it at all. Because not everybody does, and not everybody lives in a place where there are seasons. I do live in a place where there are, well, there's supposed to be 4 seasons. Nowadays, we seem to only have 2, but we do get to experience the 4 seasons, not in any great, dramatic shift or anything, but that energy is definitely present where I live. So it's a part of my practice, and it's a part of my life. But this deck definitely feels like summertime, because like there's a lot going on. This feels like a summer bonfire, where like everybody is there, and like there's a lot of talking going on. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of chaos in a sense. Like, this deck is almost a little bit chaotic for me. It's just on the cusp of being too chaotic, but I can still work with it. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I really enjoy it. It's an indie deck. I'm sorry, I've totally forgotten to say what is indie and what is mass market. I think the only things that we've looked at indie so far are the Spacious Tarot, the Tarot de St. Croix, the Superlunaris, and the Pacific Northwest Tarot. My apologies for that. I will have links for everything in the description box though. So the next deck is one that's been a long time favorite in my collection, and this is the Cheimonette Tarot. I think that's how you pronounce it. Here's the backs. I've edged mine in black. This is an absolutely stunning deck. I adore everything about this deck. Like, this is one of those that's like up in my favorites. It's kind of like it speaks to me on a soul level. This is an indie deck, by the way. And there's just something about this watercolory artwork, the energy of this deck, it just really does speak to me like on a soul level in a language that I just completely understand. Again, we're back to it's very elemental, it's very numerological, and that definitely resonates with me on a really deep and personal level. I notice a lot of the decks that do that are the ones that I tend to be really deeply invested in, and the ones that I tend to use for a lot of really deep personal work. So this is in that category for me. But it also feels like summertime to me because there's a lot of energy in this deck. There's a lot of color as well. I mean, it's a little bit more muted, so it's kind of like nighttime summer, I guess. But it definitely has that sort of energy of there's a lot of sort of fire, creative soul fire stuff going on in this deck, and that's definitely something that I resonate, or that resonates with that seasonal energy for me. So I keep it in my summer basket, but honestly, like, again, it's one that I use for all kinds of different work, so it's not necessarily tied into a specific season. I will use it other times of the year, but it feels like it resonates with that kind of maybe summery sea time energy because it's watercolor. Maybe that's my association to it. So another deck in my basket has been, again, another long time deck in my collection. And this is the Spiral Tarot, which here's the beautiful backs, said for years that I was gonna trim these borders, these horrible purple borders off with this red title bar down at the bottom. And you know what? This is one of those cases where, like, I'm not gonna, because now I've left it so long and I've worked with this deck so much with the borders and the configuration that it's in. It's a part of the deck now. It's kind of like what I was talking about with the Tarot de St. Croix, where the orange borders became a part of the deck, became a part of the deck's energy, a part of its persona for me. And that is so the case with this deck. I love this deck. One of the things that I really appreciate about this deck is the major arcana is like in this sort of upper realm, divine sort of energy, like into the cosmos, into the divine, into deity. And then the minor arcana is very much in the everyday world. And I know that throws a lot of people off, but it totally works for me because that's completely how I see those energies. Like the major arcana is the macrocosm and the minor arcana is the microcosm. This is the everyday world that we like live in and function in, and this is like the soul realm, the cosmic realm, the universal realm represented in the major arcana. And that just really resonates with like my personal belief system. So like I get it works for me with this deck. But it's also because colors, it's purple, like purple and blue. Anything purple and blue, for the most part, tends to end up in my summer basket because those are, for whatever reason, colors I associate with summer. I love this deck. I love working with this deck, but it definitely has that kind of color association that I tend to use in summertime. There's actually, if you look at the cards, like look at the actual detail in the artwork, it's very detailed, it's very intricate, and that's also an energy that I really associate with summertime, where we have, again, particularly in the majors, but also in the courts, where we have this, like, there's a lot going on. There's really a lot of detail. There's a lot of intricate work. I mean, like, look at that moon card. Beautiful. And that's, again, an energy I associate with summer. I'm going to sound like a broken record because, like, all of these decks resonate with very similar energies for me. Thus the reason they live in the same basket. However, like, they all function in completely different ways for me, which is really super cool, and why I like to have such a sort of broad collection so I can tap into those different energies. But this one's been a long time favorite for me. So another deck that lives in this basket is my Distant Past Tarot. I'll have to turn around because there's extra cards and I always keep them in there for whatever reason. I have edged mine. Here's the beautiful backs. This is, okay, so the color palette of this, like that feels like summer to me. Like turquoises, blues, totally summer. But what this deck is, and also beyond being like a deck that I associate with the summer season, it's also a deck that I use for the little bits of ancestral work that I have done. This is the deck that I've done it with. I really love the artwork in this. It is collaged. It's collaged, obviously using like, you know, old paintings and things like that. And it feels like it holds the energy of all the generations before it. I love this Two of Wands. Like there's, again, this is another one of those decks that like there's so much of it. Okay, the Baby and the Sun, not my favorite, but the most of the majority of the cards I really, really love. And like, again, it really resonates with that sort of summertime energy with the coloration, and there's like a lot of green vegetation and really blue skies, but also it definitely resonates with that sort of ancestral energy. Something, I mean, it is the distant past tarot, so maybe that was like in the creator's like the energy that she was infusing into it as she was working on it. I really don't know a ton about this creator or this deck. I did have the other one by this creator, the Second Nature Tarot, which is phenomenal. And like, I really enjoyed that deck too, kind of more of a good moods thing. But they did sit in kind of similar spaces, and I ended up rehoming that one and keeping this one because this is the one that I use most often. And it really kind of occupied a very unique space for me in terms of not only being a deck that really like is ingrained with that summertime energy. Like there is a lot going on in these cards because it is collaged. There's a lot of energy happening in these cards, but it's really that really blue sky with the really green backgrounds, the really green landscapes in most of these decks. But it also occupies a very specific space because the little bit of ancestral type work I have done, I have used this deck. So I ended up keeping this one just because like it occupies more than one thing or practice in my deck collection, and I really appreciate that about it. Can you tell that we're into the blue purple side of things? In this bag is my trimmed too many ridiculous times Gaian Tarot. This is the what's currently available Schiffer deck, and it was ridiculously huge. I couldn't work with it. I trimmed it. I did a video, a mod with me on it. It was still too big. I couldn't get my hands around it, so I trimmed it again. So me and this deck, we've gone round and round because I've trimmed it multiple times. I didn't want to. It's a pain to trim. It's really thick and glossy. I would absolutely love to have a copy of the Llewellyn version with just like the nicer cardstock and just the plain white borders. Would be fantastic. Or maybe for Schiffer to re-release this on an actual usable cardstock without, you know, multiple borders on it, would be wonderful. But this deck to me feels, again, like summer. It feels like the whole deck just feels like it exists in summertime energy. And it does feel, because I do believe that this creator is from the area that I'm from, or the area that I live in, or lived here, or like it's Pacific Northwest inspired, I think. And so again, this deck to me feels like home. Like it feels like, you know, it's here. I could step into these cards and it would be just like being, you know, stepping outside my door, which is amazing. And I really appreciate that. It's a very earthy, very grounded sort of deck, but it does feel kind of like summertime nature. So like this is kind of like my, I mean, we have the Spacious Tarot and the Pacific Northwest Tarot that feel like summer camping decks, but those feel like when you go out into nature on your own, like away from people. This feels like when you go with friends and family. Like this feels like not solitary. It feels very community driven. So whereas the others feel like maybe when like Kevin and I used to like go off hiking, just the two of us, like, you know, before we had kids and everything, when we would go off like hiking, or I guess we took the kids hiking when they were little, but in particular when we would just the two of us go off and like camp and hike and stuff like that, and you kind of get away from everybody else, that feels really where those other two decks sit. Where this deck feels like it sits when we like go camping with like loads of other families and lots of other people, and you go to like, you know, very public places and like nature based, because well, Pacific Northwest, like a lot of what we have here is based around nature, but like there's a lot of people there and you are interacting in the community, and that's what this deck feels like, is like summertime. I love this star card. Summertime outside, but with all the people that you love, and that's amazing. So this next deck is actually really quite new to my collection, and I haven't worked with it yet. It might even still be in order. This is, sorry, I've got title cards turned around. This is the Celestial Tarot, which I purchased because like I Oh, maybe I did work with it. I really I love the artwork. If I could get my words out, would be fantastic. Again, very cosmic, very blue purpley, exists in that area. The thing that I really love about this deck is there are astrological associations on every card. To my understanding, it's not the same as what lines up with the deck and walk. So like I haven't been using it for that. But like, look at this Leo card with strength. It's gorgeous. And I really love the whole astrological celestial bent to this deck. I really do want to work with it. I will be perfectly honest, I probably won't work with it until next year because unless I decide to pull it in, because it feels like, I don't know, it feels kind of also watery a little bit. Maybe it's because of the baby blue, you know, backgrounds here, but I don't know if I will get into it before the deck and walk ends, so I don't know if I'll use it before next year, just because I don't want to confuse myself, because I do understand that it doesn't follow that in the same way, but I absolutely want to work with this deck. It is gorgeous, gorgeous artwork. Look at that, beautiful. And I'm really looking forward to getting to know it, but I want to get to know it through the lens in which the creators intended and not try to force it into, you know, the deck and work that I'm doing now. So I'm probably going to let it sit, and that's fine. It can sit for another, you know, well, few months, almost a year now, and that's fine. It'll be here when I'm ready for it. I think it's going to be a fantastic one to get to know, but I haven't done so yet. We're nearing the end of my summer tarot basket. This deck has been around forever with me. This is my Star Tarot. It's my first edition. I have trimmed mine completely down to the artwork. It's very, very glossy, but like there is something to be said about like when you work with these decks for years on end, they stop being sticky, and while it's still pretty thick, they start like getting this almost like buttery feel to them. It's not like rose petal matte, but it's still like buttery. I don't know how to explain it. It's just something that happens to these older shifter decks after they've been like really well used for many, many years, because I've had this deck for many, many years, and it's a treasure in my collection. It is like kind of like my quintessential cosmic deck, because this deck has like everything in it. The guidebook is amazing. Like whenever I get around to doing my like favorite tarot guidebooks, this one will for sure be in there, because it's got so much information in it, and like everything is noted that's on the card, which is amazing. You can full on deep dive into this deck. But again, this deck feels like summer. It feels like a summer nighttime sky. It does again feel like it exists in a landscape that's very familiar to me as well. There's like the strength card, which is one of my favorite. Isn't that beautiful? I've done a lot of work with this deck. This deck I pair quite often with my Trim Tarot of the Sidhe, and I have like specific work and readings that I do with that. I might have shared in a video at some point or another. If not, I certainly can. But this deck is just, it's amazing. But again, there's a lot going on. There's some RWS influence, there's some Thoth influence, there's some Marseille influence. I think this was one of those that's kind of just a hybrid of systems, and then there are places where it kind of does its own thing as well. But it really just resonates with summer energy for me. It is one that I use, I don't know if I showed you the backs, but like I trimmed it and edged it in silver. It is like one of those decks that like it really resonates with this seasonal energy, but I use it year round. It's not like just for summer. Some of these decks that we've looked at, like I do use for other things, but some of them, like I only really pull them out in the summertime because that's the energy that resonates for me with the deck. But this deck I've been using for years, and I use it all the time. Last deck in this funky bag, because this deck, there's nothing about this deck that should really appeal to me, yet it's one of my favorites. It is oversized, it is glossy. I have trimmed it, believe it or not. Like it's almost bigger than my hand. I've trimmed it. This is the Sirian Starseed Tarot. So I trimmed mine and edged it. It had, believe it or not, white borders around this. Like it's so glossy, you can see my camera. This is like old school, just beginning to learn digital collage work is the vibe it gives me. Like, it reminds me of stuff I did, like, you know, 15, 20 years ago, when I was learning digital art myself. So like, there's a bit of nostalgia here with this deck, I think. I think that's kind of what I've come around to. This deck is out of print. I don't know if I've mentioned that, but you can still find it on like eBay and stuff. I don't think it's highly sought after. Like, I think most people see this deck and they're like, it's weird. I love it. Like, it just, I don't know. There's something about it. It's like super kind of old school to me. It reminds me of like back then when I was like learning to do this kind of stuff. I mean, this is kind of amazing. There's some cards in here that are really, really fantastic. But the thing about this deck is that the energy of the cards and the way that the little guidebook is actually really fantastic, but the way that this deck is interpreted feels very much in alignment with the way that I read. So we have a lot of very pippish kind of elemental numerological cards, not all, but some. And then we have like that cosmic energy, right? The thing I like about this deck, I think, and I have very few like what would be maybe other people would consider like Starseed decks. Like, most of them sit in like the pastel pinky, lots of purples and yellows and pink, and did I say pink already? You know, that pastel kind of Danielle Noel world. Like, and no offense against that creator, because like I own all of her decks and clearly I'm a fan. But most of them exist in that aesthetic, in that landscape, and this is one of the few cosmic decks that I have that actually feels like it's a little bit more grounded in earthy energy. So it feels a little bit more rooted in reality than some of those other decks do. I mean, some of it's pretty like woo and out there, but like on the whole, I feel like it dives a little bit deeper into the rootedness of like that starseed energy on earth, if you will. Except for this one. This one's like super woo. But, I mean, that one pretty much is too. A lot of the majors are. This is romance novel cover, right? And I say that completely lovingly because as a cover artist for like over a decade, I can't tell you how many covers I made that look like that. So like, I'm throwing no shade. I just have a really weird appreciation for it. Sometimes that's a miss for me, and sometimes I'm like, that takes me back to something that I don't really want to go back to in this work. But like, in rare occasions, I'm like, I appreciate it. It works for me. Anyway, I'm gonna end up flipping through the whole deck as I'm talking about it, but there's just something about this deck. I don't know what it is. It shouldn't work for me. It's glossy. It's like not great photo collaging. It's oversized. It's hard to work with like in a physical sense, and yet I love this deck. Like, everything about it. Look at that Master of Crystals with the crystal skull. We'll just leave it on that because that's amazing. So I think that's it. That's like, look at, okay. Can you see, like, this basket is so big I can't even fit it under my camera, and I'm not gonna move my camera, but look at, there's one side. And let me try to shift it around, and there's the other. So clearly I have a theme going on, and there's a very clear dividing between these two. I think we looked at 20 decks. Here, we'll just throw a couple down. 20 decks in my summer basket. As always, I'll have links for everything I've shown here in the description box below for you. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at my favorite summer tarots, which is really what these baskets are. My favorite decks for each of the seasons, although several of them I use for other things as well. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I look forward to sharing with you again soon.